Nelson, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure, guys. All right, so yeah, this week we're going to have a bit of an open discussion about the Livepeer community, and also sort of talking a little bit about some of what Livepeer is planning for the second half of 2019 in regards to community, and also briefly discussing the community node and grant program, as well as talking about community in general with all the guests we've got on the call. So to kick it off, we might start with the question just on what is Livepeer doing at the moment to raise awareness in of the project, and also
let's just start because we've got all these amazing community members here. So let's actually start. I created a deck. And what I'd like to do is maybe go around for the people who reached out to Mark or I around like, what is your will you please join and talk more about your community? Maybe would love to kind of hear from you all. And the goal of this call is really around brainstorming together and sharing kind of what's working, what's not, and maybe sharing ideas and learning about maybe new things that we can all try or iterate on. Because there's some really incredible people on the call. So can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe for the folks on the call, would love to hear kind of who you are, what is your community, where does it live in terms of online, in person, around the world, and who is that for you? Maybe Tor, do you want to start?
Yeah. Who is my community? What do they mean to me?
Yeah.
Why are we best friends? Sure. For context, for those of you that I don't know, I'm the head of growth marketing, community, etc. for Enigma. Our community's changed a lot from when we started really building out the public aspect of our project. The project technically started in 2015. Starting in 2017 with our token offering, we had very much a public community after that. The way that we break it down now is we break it into some primary audiences, usually by intent. So, from strongest to weakest. The two strongest intent audiences that we have are people who want to operate staking nodes in our network and people who want to actually build on our protocol. And both of those are pretty development heavy tasks. So sometimes I lump them all into sort of our developer community and developer relations functions. But really, those are the people that we need to get really excited about the technology, about being able to collaborate with our core developers, become core contributors. That's sort of the center of the bullseye, and they work directly with us. Surrounding the center of that bullseye, we have a program called the Enigma Collective, which is our evolved ambassador program. That's for people who have taken an active interest in the project for reasons beyond development. Maybe our mission and ethos around personal freedoms and privacy really resonate with them, and they want to do everything they can to help push the project forward. But they might not have technical capabilities, but these are people who come from creative fields, or they're people who work in business or government, and this is just how they have decided to throw their support behind the project. I find that a lot of the open source communities that I've been involved with, if you don't have a development skill set, you get marginalized. And that was something that from the beginning stages of the project, we wanted to ensure didn't happen to us, because we didn't think we could build a scalable product and protocol. Sorry, they're having the Air and Water Show in Chicago right now, so there's giant jets flying by. I can't do anything about that. But yeah, so that's the inner layer is still the developer community that we're trying to build because they directly support the protocol. Around that, the collective, which is application only, and we do regular calls like this one, internally as an all hands. And then around that is the broad community of just anybody who might hold the token, anybody who's interested in using applications built on the protocol, people who are just very curious about the future of the space. Many of them share a long-term perspective with us, 2 to 5 years out versus 2 weeks out. We're very much, I think, because of the way the project has evolved, we've systematically eliminated people who really care about exchanges and all those kinds of things because, we've asked for a lot of people's patience. So just by accident, I think we've gotten down to the core of it, people who are really resonating with our ethos. And I think that's where any project in the space would like to get to, where everybody that they're interacting with on a regular basis shows the mission, the values of the project, and wants to lean in and wants to engage proactively with the core developers.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think we've got some follow-up questions that we'll dig into in a bit, but Mahoney, do you want to introduce yourself? Mic on. We can hear you. Hi.
Hey, okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, sorry if I've just kind of landed in Stockholm today and finessing internet stuff right now. So hopefully I'm all coherent and clear over the line. But yeah, just dropped in to a new place.
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you for joining.
No, I'm totally stoked. Thank you for inviting. So yeah, communities. Right now with Blockdaemon, it's pretty interesting because from the community perspective, and I've been consulting with these guys for like 3 months. So actually I haven't been like in the depths of their structure for ages. But what's very clear, and like from the directly related to the Livepeer perspective, is community-wise, because we're not a protocol, we're not a project, so it's a kind of a different angle. But for sure, it's very heavy on working in tandem with foundations very closely, foundations or projects, and really supporting them as much as possible from a infrastructure perspective, like in the weeds of it all. So it's a different, it's definitely a different community angle than I was previously involved in with Consensus up until end of last year. So I guess, yeah, there's many kind of layers to it, and it keeps evolving because our basically kind of like the thrust of the business keeps changing quite rapidly, actually, as we need to be supporting different projects from that infrastructure perspective. So yeah, developer relations, of course, is always an interest and big part of what I'm doing, but right now it's a bit more nuanced. So yeah, hopefully this is kind of making sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, and we'll dig in a bit and kind of ask more. But that's a good overview for us, I think.
Okay,
thank you.
Cool.
Lane. Hi.
Hello, can you hear me? What an awesome group here. So thanks for inviting me, and thanks for Rowan for joining. Boy, where to start? I guess like many of us, or I guess all of us, I kind of sit at the intersection of a few communities, and I really like this concept of intersectionality, which I've been kind of learning and exploring a little bit recently, right? So like, it's very difficult to draw, very sharp lines around certainly the communities I'm a part of, and there's a lot of kind of overlaps and stuff, which I think is kind of fun and exciting to explore. I guess sort of the biggest, most active community that I'm a part of is just kind of the broader Ethereum community. And this is like a very deep rabbit hole that we could spend, any length of time going down. Like it's actually something that we discuss quite a bit in Ethereum. Sorry, Mahoney, would you mind muting on your line? I'm just getting a little bit of feedback. Oh, perfect. Thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, we kind of talk a lot about like what community means in the context of Ethereum, and I think it's a challenge for a project like Ethereum that hasn't done a ton to kind of be very explicit upfront about things like mission and vision and values and the type of things that usually unite a community, right? So I think that we do definitely have things like shared values, but I think we struggle to articulate them, and I think that has an impact on things like governance. Again, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. But in contrast, so obviously the Ethereum community is very global, it's very inclusive, it's a big tent, it's primarily like digital, there's also conferences. I also helped launch a community here in New York City called Crypto NYC back in 2017. And I think this is an interesting counterpoint because there's obviously some overlap. There's many people who are active in Ethereum who are also active in the Crypto NYC community, but it's much smaller and it's like an in-person community, and we kind of do events and things. So that's kind of the two communities that immediately come to mind for me.
Thank you.
Awesome. And Scott, welcome.
Yeah, hey all. Glad to be here. I'm not sure how much context everyone has on like the Gitcoin community, but essentially we let you take, there's sort of two parts. We let you take GitHub issues and bounty them in ERC20 tokens. That's like getting users to be contributors. And then we let maintainers basically get paid a monthly stipend for their work. And our community is sort of mostly, yeah, Lane, this is Toronto actually still. It's pretty great. There's actually some greenery here half the year. Essentially most of our community is developers, and they're developers who are both already in Web3, who are working on protocols, who are working on core infrastructure. And then there are also developers in Web2 who have not really explored the industry yet and want to get involved. We're actually like slowly focusing more on that latter category because like if you look at the total pool of developers that exist in Web3 today, it's still like relatively small. Maybe in the order of like, the 5 or 6 figure range. So ultimately what our hope is that we can bring more of these developers from Web2 into Web3 and get more people thinking about these sort of pure technologies and, the sort of values behind them. So ultimately that's where we've been focused in the last sort of year. And so far we have about 15 to 20,000 developers on our mailing list in total, just from like variety of different communities. And in addition to that, we don't have a token, so we don't really have that component of community ourselves, but we do have a lot of people who are interested in those sorts of tokens. And so one interesting split is who is working on our platform because they're particularly interested in a project or in a particular protocol, who is working because they're interested in being part of a network, whether that's something like Livepeer, whether that's something like 0x and so forth. And so we have people that post both in like ETH and in DAI and in other ERC20 tokens. And that split is really interesting to see, especially as like the number of different smaller communities evolves in the ecosystem. So that's a rough overview. Yeah, maybe I'll leave it there, and then like we can always dive into more components afterwards.
Awesome, thank you. Is there anyone else on the call that's community lead that I haven't gotten to?
Yeah, I think we have Anna from Fluence.
Hi, Anna.
Here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, for those who don't know, we are building a decentralized computing platform, the cloud. So we are protocol, and our community is developers. So we're essentially focused on Web3 developers because we've done the maybe you've heard we've done the research, the dApp developer research back to January, and found out that, of course, that dApps are not decentralized as it could be. So we are focusing on that. But what Scott told, we are also interested in Web2 developers because it's, of course, the bigger crowd. So we are gonna be tapping into that. What we found the most useful from the tools, I can say that we found hackathons, offline hackathons. We've done 2 now with several projects. Locally, we've done one in Moscow and one in Minsk, and it works just perfect. The engagement was great. 2 days people were building with our protocol, and we got a lot of feedback, so I can share more. I'm in Berlin, so hopefully to see you here. I guess most of you will be here, right? For the blockchain week. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will be there. Thank you.
Awesome. So it seems like everyone has like a broad scope of different types of, I'm working in a hotel lobby because my internet in my room is not working, but it seems like everyone has a focus on the developer community. And maybe that is something that we can focus on. Everyone has like different, like a broader scope, but so what I'd love to do, well, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the Livepeer community today, and then we can go into a discussion about what's worked really well and like what's really difficult. So the Livepeer community, when I think about who that is, it's token holders, it's video engineers who we ultimately want to use our like plugins and APIs to like insert that in their tech stack. It's our investors, and it's the broader community that's like excited about crypto and thinks the project is interesting. In terms of like where we live, our home is on Discord. There's probably, let's see, about 2,000 members on the server, and there's a small Telegram group, and kind of the way that we've thought about like what does it mean to join the community. It's join a community call, it's join Discord, and we have like a group of community admins who just organically became involved in answering and supporting, and started giving small like give them a role within the community on Discord, and different people bring different things. Like for example, Nelson, who opened up this call, does all the community calls in terms of like what the content should be, and he works with me and Doug on that and facilitates them. Alvin, if you join our Discord, will ping you and greet you and ask you what brings you there. And another person, Pascal, is on the call as well. Thanks for joining. Has been talking to our engineering leads and getting updates to then create forum posts around like developer updates. And so that's like trying to get people involved in terms of bringing something that they're good at and contributing that to the community. And then there's a grant program, and yeah, that's kind of what it is today. So now maybe we can talk a little bit about, why don't we talk about like, what's one experiment that you've tried that's worked really well that you're going to keep doing?
Maybe I can scope this a little bit, and we'll see if we can get
Great.
So there's experiments around attracting people to the community, right? Like it's up at the awareness part of the funnel, and then there's, you know, that immediate step after that where they have that first moment of engagement. And then everything else after that is really about retention and keeping them engaged in the community. And I would say that through a lot of trial and error, some of it which we didn't intend to do, we figured out a lot of what helps people get involved and engaged in early stages, and then what helps retain them in later stages of the community, like after they've already put some time into it and they've decided, you know, this is what it's about. It's not as structured of an experiment as saying like we've A/B tested Twitter ads or something like that, like traditionally how you would do it. But like when I think about experimentation in a community, I do think about like how you empower people from the first day to contribute. So we originally had our community, like this collective was all based on Telegram in separate channels. Then we decided like, you know, one Telegram channel wouldn't do it. We needed like working groups. We needed people to be specifically thinking about here's what developer community as a initiative that we're all working on together would look like. Here's what evolving our visual identity looks like. Here's what university relations looks like. And we had separate Telegram channels for all of those. Then we realized that visibility was too low. So we put out like a survey and did a call for suggestions, and as a result, migrated everybody in the collective over to Slack. Then we were using Slack, but people started realizing that that was real time and there wasn't enough, you know, stored knowledge. So we introduced an Airtable so that people could collaborate on projects and see who had ownership of which initiatives, and increased collaboration. And all of these things sequentially that I'm describing were really effective at retention. It didn't change who was interested because these were all like inner workings of the community. It didn't change how we attracted people to the community, but it made them much less likely to disengage because they felt like that there was some sort of way that they could immediately contribute. That, again, we weren't being prescriptive and saying these are the only projects. We also made them like tools that anybody could edit and use. That's probably where we've had the most success and the biggest returns in terms of experimenting. And where I would like to experiment next is more around how, I don't really know how to phrase this. I just want to experiment more at that top of the funnel. Like, how can we create a loop so that collective members are much more able and empowered to recruit new members? Because right now I feel like they're very good at contributing to the project. But from a growth perspective, we take a lot of that on our shoulders, and it really should be, everybody should feel empowered to speak on behalf of the community and want to expand it and grow it. And part of that comes from us, like really solidifying the messages around our ethos and values. That, I think, would be where we go next.
That's awesome. At some point over this call, if you would share the Airtable link, or I don't know if it's, I mean, it must be open, right?
It's invite. So the collective is invite only. So the tools are invite only.
Okay.
But I'm happy to provide some screenshots after the call. I also might have to jump off in 10 minutes,
Great.
which is why I'm speaking first. But I'm happy to share those resources because it was pretty effective for us.
Cool. Thanks. Anybody else want to share?
So I think on our end, we've tried quite a few things on both like the activation and on the retention side. I think on the retention side, it's about really just creating shared experience and shared context around the atomic unit of work on our platform is like bounties. It's like you work on a particular bounty, you sort of form a relationship with the maintainer or the other like PR review person that you're working with on this repo. And then ideally you sort of form this like context for the org itself. And then that sort of gives you a starting point when you want to like work on that project again for how you might actually engage. So like, is this like the kind of project that you want to work on? If so, like, what do you want to work on in particular? Do you want to work on like their website? Do you want to work on like the protocol level stuff? Do you want to work on like often there's 20 plus different repos to like choose from. And ultimately, the hard part is really just making sure that one, you have really good matching so that people are like in that first step getting to the repo that they actually want to work on. Like the more fails that there are in that like process, the more likely that it is someone will just like leave and not use the platform again. And then once they've found that repo, making it really easy for them to actually find new ways to engage with that repo or with that organization is really important. So one way we've been doing that is by essentially letting like people just like favorite different repos or favorite different contributors on the other hand, and form those relationships on the platform. Ultimately, that's been super helpful. Even though it's just a small thing, it's a good like starting point for hopefully like a larger formation of teams sort of feature in the future. That's sort of the main one that I wanted to bring up. And then in addition, it's just a matter of sort of constantly, I think, trying to hit home the message of open source for us. Like lots of people in especially Web 2 are very skeptical of Web 3, and sometimes for good reason. I think that it's important to have the right messaging when talking to those people. Like I was just at DEF CON, and like DEF CON is not particularly cryptocurrency friendly. The Monero Village is not particularly well regarded. And there's reasons for that. But if you have like good conversations with the, even the cryptos and cryptography people, you can reach common ground and get them to understand some of the value of like particular pieces of the technology. And I think that's super helpful, mostly because we all share the same ethos of like open source first and open source as like an important part of how we like create a decentralized web. And so ultimately, that's another big piece, is just making sure that you are sending the right message and like sort of spiritually aligned in a sense with the people who are using your platform. So
when someone contributes or participates in a bounty, like what's the next step in terms of like what's the next touch point for them?
Yeah, so we follow
from you all.
Yeah, we follow up with everyone who posts a bounty and who contributes to a bounty, just asking them like, first of all, just like what their experience was. Like, what did you like? you dislike? What would you like do differently in terms of like this process, and like how can we basically like what would the easiest way for us to make that improvement be in your mind, just so we have a sense of like from each perspective of the marketplace what we need to do to improve.
Yeah.
But other than that,
what I'm
yep. Oh no. Well, the last thing I was
Oh,
just gonna say is so, like I also tend to
I was
provide
gonna say,
these of like that they can look through just so they know like what else is out there. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm curious, since it's interesting, you have an interesting bird's eye view on different projects and the types of things they want help from a developer community. And do you have any kind of insights on the types of projects that are most successful? Whether that's around like whether it's like a philosophy, or if it's around like snap.
Yeah. So I think in terms of like philosophy, that's a tough subject, right? Like that's like we're getting into the like the detailed motivations as to why people do bounties. And I think that maybe I'll just start with like the projects first and then dive into that, so it gives me more time to think about it mostly. But if you look at the types of projects that are doing really well, like one of them is just like tooling an ecosystem. Again, most of this is within Web3 still. Like the types of projects that are posting are mostly Web3 projects, and that's because we're paying people in ERC20 tokens. Naturally, the people who are willing to do that are people with ERC20 tokens, and those are people who are already in the ecosystem. We're looking at ways to expand beyond that or make it easier for people to pay in those tokens. So we're excited about like some of the UX onboarding type of work that's happening, meta transactions being one component of that. Just so that we have more less friction in how we engage sort of like people who are not in Web3 already. But project wise, yeah, other than the like tooling, we've also got like a lot of people who want to find more developers for their like ecosystem to build on top of their protocols. So for example, you know, a project like NewCipher or a project like actually Enigma as well, and Livepeer. Pretty much everyone everyone on here has pretty much used this, I think, in some capacity. And I think the main draw there is just that you actually have a chance to get people building cool stuff in your ecosystem. And ultimately, that's what we're all looking for, is like, what are these like use cases, these examples where we can sort of like showcase to the broader community what Web3 can do. And this is sort of like a testing ground for some of those experiments, for some of those like use cases that like can give rise to like a much larger project down the road. We had one hackathon project, for example, in the one we did with Aetherium back in May, I think that was May, where a woman from Indonesia wanted a cross-border loan for less than 40% interest, which is what she was currently being offered in her local market, so that she could go to Cornell. And yeah, Rafi, it was a bit choppy for me. I was noticing that from other, like mostly on, okay, if it's fine for everyone else, then that's good. It was choppy for me for a bit, but so she got this this idea for this product because she was literally unable to get a cross-border loan without this crazy interest rate. And so she paired up with 4 or 5 other people and was able to build this over a 2-week period, and now has funding from Binance to continue it, and like is able to sort of showcase this like example of what might be possible using Bloom and a few other protocols in Web3. And so that's the sort of stuff that's really interesting. It's just like, what are these use cases? How do we get like developers, like, or like from a project standpoint, what does it mean for there to be developer adoption? And like, what does it mean for us to have these like use cases? So I guess like, I'm sort of rambling because I'm like on low sleep today, but like essentially, I think there's that component of developer adoption that's like critical for most of the users on the funder side of our platform.
Cool.
Awesome. Did anyone else
Thank
want to
you.
share anything on what's worked really well?
I can share a couple quick thoughts on Ethereum. I mean, I think it's very hard to answer a question. I feel like I'm always prefacing everything I say about Ethereum with it. It's hard to answer this question because, I mean, you know, it's obviously one of the larger, you know, older, more active communities within Web3. I think, you know, Ethereum has done a lot of things, like many of which I think have worked really, really well. I think a bunch of them have just like failed spectacularly. And I think I caught a glimpse of a later slide being something like what's not working. So I guess I'll save that for that part. But you know, I think like events, I mean, this is such a like obvious thing, right? But like hackathons, like really hands-on events, I think have been really, really good. I think I like just general, and again, this may be a little bit different for layer 1 and layer 2, because in some sense there's sort of more at stake at layer 1, kind of financially and, you know, via things like governance mechanisms. I think that like relatively transparent and accessible governance, like protocol governance, I think has served Ethereum really well, right? So having these like bi-weekly core developer calls, which everyone is kind of free to join. I think also the Fellowship of Ethereum Magicians, right, which is like an initiative for decentralized technical governance of the platform. So again, kind of effort to kind of make it more accessible to people who are not like themselves core developers and like super deep in the code and the protocol. I think those things go a long way towards enfranchising a community and just getting buy-in and getting people excited about the project.
I think there's something really unique about the Ethereum project. If I compare Ethereum to, you know, for example, Livepeer, is that like there are so many strong leaders in that ecosystem, or people with a lot of with a lot of initiative. Like people are like you, right? Like you went into the Ethereum ecosystem and you started like driving a lot of things forward, kind of like by yourself, or like from an individual, like either you're from like ideal alignment standpoint, or from other types of or other types of like reasons. Like there's a lot of that, right? Like all these projects that are coming out, ETH Global, like all these things that are like contributing to the whole to the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole. And yeah, like, do you have any thoughts around that in terms of like what were the early days like for Ethereum, and how did it get to a point where, you know, there were so many strong individuals in the ecosystem that took on large initiatives and like grew that over a long period of time?
You know, it's a good question, but I actually disagree. I actually think that my subjective impression is very much that Ethereum has like a strong allergy to like leadership. And I think what we've seen actually is that the most opinionated, strongest people have either been forced out of the ecosystem or have just voluntarily left, right, to kind of start other projects, most of them being at layer 2. But in some cases, you have people like, not to pick on anyone in particular, but like Charles Hoskinson was like a very strong voice early on in the community. And like clearly there, as I said, there's sort of an allergy on the part of the Ethereum Foundation and a lot of kind of the early folks. I think it makes them very uncomfortable. And I think I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but like I've encountered a lot of this as well. You know, when I start kind of asking hard questions or poking the bear, so to speak, and saying like, hey, why isn't the Ethereum Foundation more transparent and this kind of thing? Like you get this allergic reaction and you get like a very strong pushback from people. I think in this respect, Ethereum has taken decentralization like just taken that slider and slid it all the way up to the max. And I think that as with everything, it's a trade-off, and there's like really awesome things you get from it, but it's an extraordinarily like anti-fragile community. And I think that was demonstrated very strongly in 2016 by kind of the reaction to like the DAO attack. And like people have said, and I wasn't around at the time, so actually, Eric, I can't answer the second part of your question, which is like, what were things like early on, and how did they kind of become like this? I kind of joined in 2017 as things were not quite crazy, but kind of about to become crazy. But I think what a lot of people have told me, right, is that like any more centralized project or platform would have been completely destroyed by what happened in 2016. You know, you had like consensus failures, you had like clients that weren't producing blocks for long periods of time, you had the DAO attack, obviously, you had like relentless attack on the part of like Bitcoin maximalists. And I think Ethereum was only able to like survive and thrive through that period because of decentralization. So that's like the benefit to it. But I think the downside is we're seeing that in very harsh reality right now, like with the Ethereum 2 project, for example. Like no one really seems like no one's in charge, right? So it's like you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different answers about what it is and when it's going to be done and this kind of stuff. It's interesting. I guess we have strong community leaders, and I guess I'm kind of one of those in Ethereum, and we have very differing kind of opinions and thoughts on like what Ethereum is and what it should be, which again is a product of what I said at the beginning, which is that like there was never really an effort to like get alignment on things like mission or principles or vision or values for Ethereum. We have very strong leaders of projects like Livepeer is a great example. You guys are very much in the Ethereum community, but like in the core, there really aren't any leaders. And it's interesting, we had Vitalik, and like he's very mindfully kind of like made this effort over the past year and change to kind of like step back and just kind of seeing the impact that's had on the ecosystem and this like vacuum that's kind of resulted from it.
And Lane, just a follow-up question. This might be contentious, but regarding the sort of DAO hack, do you think the differences between like the Ethereum and the Ethereum Classic community, do you think that's all ideological, or do you think part of the success of Ethereum was community?
Wow, that's like a super difficult question, and I'm probably not the right person to answer because I wasn't in the community in 2016. I will just a couple thoughts. One is that like Ethereum and Ethereum Classic have been actually collaborating more and more closely recently. I think there's even some sort of like big collaboration that's going to be announced at DevCon this year regarding Ethereum 1 and ETH1X and stuff. So I guess what I'm getting at by that is to say that we're actually like, it seems like the two communities are actually not that values disaligned, right? I think that like they have far more in common than the things that separate them. I mean, probably community was a factor, right? Probably the fact that like, Vitalik and Hudson and Nick Johnson and a bunch of other like, strong community leaders were able to kind of rally together behind this cause in 2016 and push through this contentious hard fork with, the vast majority of support had, kind of speaks quite strongly to the power of that community. And I don't know that the other side, that which became Ethereum Classic, had such an active community, but it's a good question.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, did anyone have anything they wanted to add?
Hey, Rafi, I was just going to add, in light of kind of the value add of educating within the community, I mean, from my perspective, out of the teams I've been with, we've had actually kind of really positive spin-offs from hosting workshops and getting more into the specific education side, whether that be token economics or specific more like ZK Snarks training, and when I was with the Coda team, for example. So I was going to throw it open to you guys if you have some, particular feedback on that front, because for sure, education is empowerment within the community. That's key for going back to earlier point around retention. So kind of a comment, question.
Wait, feedback on what? On what?
On kind of importance that's placed on workshops and targeted education offerings, and then the basically the ROI on that from a retention standpoint.
We haven't done a ton of targeted, like, okay, let's say it's a web developer who's interested in our Livepeer.js repo and doing specific education on here's like this code, all about this code base and how to build. Well, we did one call like that and then had a follow-up hackathon, like virtual hackathon opportunity. I think it's good to like combine education with like an opportunity to do something. But in our case, I think it's been interesting, kind of the ways that we wanted to engage the Ethereum community. Like, for example, ETH Berlin last year had a prize, or sponsored it, had a prize, and no one applied because it was like, build a live stream video app, and that just wasn't what people who came to that hackathon wanted to do. And so I think for us, I believe it is good to have targeted like educational content, but we haven't cracked the code in terms of like who we should be creating that content for.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I mean, I would also say another thing that, looking back at like where the project was during ETH Berlin, it was at a point where like it was a little difficult for a developer to really like take the code and really understand what was going on and really be able to like build end-to-end a product without like a lot of digging, and like really and it really needed to spend a bunch of effort to like make it happen. And I wonder if like just this stage of this project and the maturity of the technology itself has to do with that as well, Rafi.
Yeah, I will say one thing that I learned from, I kind of went to 5 different hackathons and did user interviews of 40 participants over around 3 different countries, and kind of came away with one observation that's relevant to content, like what to educate people about, is that people came with an idea of the type of, like from a philosophical perspective of why they cared about blockchain, and like wanted, whether that was, I want to do something with a stable coin, or I want to do something with identity, and veered to, like, they kind of came in thinking that philosophical ideal was important, and found the projects that could help them with that. And that was something for me that, we had veered it all around, like build this live stream chat app, but it really could have been maybe something around staking as something, and participate, like build an app where people can participate, and can you like think about delegate, like staking and participation, or that would have been philosophically like kind of more aligned with what I found people were drawn to from a topic perspective. So we have 13 minutes left, and I want to kind of talk a little bit. So there's the people on the call, there's amazing community leaders, and then there's our team and some of our community admin like leaders as well. And what maybe I'd like to do is spend a few minutes talking about what what you guys think. I guess one thing that I'm trying to think about is like, what type of engagement should we be focusing on here? Like, are we focused on getting people to create new grant proposals versus join community calls versus get Livepeer token and stake? And like, what do you guys think we should be focusing on? And this is to everyone, including everyone on our team and community leaders. Yeah, like what's important and why from your perspective?
Maybe just to jump in on that, Rafi, I think like, for example, pointing to the Livepeer primer is a really good example of something that's really high value for the community, because I think one of the challenges Livepeer has is don't understand crypto, that understand transcoding, and then developers that understand crypto but don't understand transcoding. And I think it really kind of breaks it down to explain the other half of that, just in simple terms. So I think like content and like events that can help kind of bridge that gap are really important, and just sort of helping not just educate people about transcoding, but also just crypto in general.
Any other folks? Like, especially interested to hear, community, I think, can help support the development. So yeah, just interested to hear from our engineering team around if you think it's important to see more engagement on different repos and why, and if not, that's also fine.
Yeah, I think there hasn't been like the like material contribution to the Livepeer technology from the community has been mostly done via like targeted partnerships, right? So like the examples I think of are like either people who have gotten grants to work on a specific area, or like the example that I'm thinking about now is the collaboration between Livepeer and Epic Labs, which is a video company based in Spain. And they got a research grant to like work on a specific area of Livepeer. And while like I think one area of contribution or like activity for the Livepeer code base that would be interesting is kind of the tooling side, going back to what Scott has said before, right? Like developers are all used to different types of tools that they want to use. And I think like one thing that Ethereum did really well at the very beginning is having like web3.js, right? Like the fact that like developers are able to use JavaScript to like write Ethereum code like that did wonders to the community. And like so to that extent, like building tools, like native tools for developers who want to who are interested in the technology is something that I think is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that pretty strongly, Eric. I think the point you made in the context of Ethereum is super relevant too. Just like it's one thing for a community to be like a talking shop and like, oh, like happy, warm vibes, and we all share values and things like that. But like I can speak, as a developer, it's the next level, right? If I can kind of roll up my sleeves and like dig into the tech, and certainly like I have this line I use in Ethereum, which is like I came for the tech and I stayed for the people. I think that's exactly it. You want the tech to like hook people, and like maybe they're like, oh, actually these people are kind of cool. There's more here than tech, right?
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The importance of just having that core baseline tech and usability from a DX perspective, like a developer's perspective, is really important.
Anyone have anything? Otherwise, I'll move to the next section. Cool. So I want to spend a couple minutes just talking about the community node, which I've been running. When we launched to mainnet, I created a node that kept 50% of the reward cut, and Eric helps me operate it and call reward. And we kind of created this in order to help like incentivize the community to contribute. And I think it's one way that we can continue to see engagement. It's not the only thing, but I want to give everyone an update on this. And so we'll start with just kind of like how it's been used to date. So you can see here, this is the number of tokens that have been granted per month. And we've over doubled the amount of tokens that are granted month over month, or not month over month, but since the beginning. And so today we're granting about 4,300 tokens at a price of $28,000 a month of grants. And in terms of how that relates to the amount the node is earning, you can see here the total income of the reward cut that the node is earning. And here's just a different way of seeing that, where it's the percent of the node that the percent of the reward that's being spent. And it's kind of been 30%-ish. And it will, I think, continue to be that way because we don't want to just spend, or I don't want to just spend it all in, like, I want to keep some of it staked and have it for the future as well. And I think also a lot of the opportunity for how this token get allocated comes when our code, that when there's more opportunities for developers to contribute. And there's like more sophisticated documentation around like different areas where they can play around with building their own stream or contributing in a different way. And so I think some is best used in the future when we're able to really grow the developer community with tooling, as we've talked about. And then this is showing the number of recipients per month that are unique. In terms of how that's been spent, it's on everything from user testing. So, we're coming out with a new app and a new website, and people can contribute and earn 5 token by being a user tester. We did this with our Merkle Mine experience as well about a year ago. It's for the grant. I would say right now about half of each month is going to Epic Labs for the verification, but also we're funding the development of the grant UX. I mean the new staking app UX and the new website is also coming through this, and it's through external community participants, as well as people. Oh, okay, wait, I'm talking through this, but I also made a whole presentation about things that people have built. So I'll just go through a few cool things. So Adam just joined the team full time, but before that, he was a community member and he built lots of cool stuff. This alert notification is one example that gives you an email about how many token you've earned. Another group called another one that does a similar thing. And so there's competition or like who can build a better app. There's been some really fun localization efforts of translating the white paper and then having a event around that, and also giving token for like kind of getting that in local newspaper, or not newspapers, local like crypto websites. So there's been Russian, French, Portuguese, there was Chinese. We did a user study. We did a community call a while ago with the persona work that was funded, researching different token holder personas. And DTalk is.
Oh, did we lose her? I can talk about DTalk. DTalk is a hackathon project that came out of ETH Cape Town that won a lot of awards during that hackathon, that uses Livepeer to have a decentralized video streaming experience and allow people to pay using micropayments to the streamer. So this is the team has continued to build this project, and the continuation of the project was largely funded by the grants.
Have I been muted this whole time?
No, you haven't. We just lost you.
Oh, okay.
We were talking about DTalk.
Okay. Okay. Just checking. Thank you. I was like, oh my gosh. Thank you. And ThreeBucks is something Connor's working on. This will allow these little icons, avatars, to be identities connected with ThreeBucks. Connor, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. ThreeBucks is another project. Their goal is decentralized profiles, decentralized storing of data, and we want to use their system to bring a more human feel to our Explorer interface. Right now, people are only identified with procedurally generated avatars based on their Ethereum address and then their address right next to it. So what I've been working on is a file system where people can upload a profile picture, set their name, their description, set a website, and then if they're a transcoder, you identify them by that. If they're a user, you can also see that if you look at their profile. Pretty simple, and it's decentralized,
Awesome.
so it's really cool.
Thank you. And so I want to just end it with kind of any ideas or brainstorm around like what role could the community grants play in increasing engagement? Any ideas or suggestions from folks on the call?
I'm a big proponent of grants for these types of organizations because these blockchain startups that are open source and do these things they're businesses, they're companies. It's not like the Linux kernel where people are just contributing because they like it and they want to succeed. I mean, people might, but to a lot of people, I think it might feel like giving free labor to a company. And so there's going to be a way to actually get people to help out and contribute.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I'm biased, of course, but I think that like whether it's like smaller bounties or larger like grants, that sort of is really critical for getting people to build on a project long term. One thing in particular that we've seen as like really helpful is just like, again, hackathons. Just trying to get more people engaged on projects for like a weekend or for like a longer sort of period, so that they have a bit more time to like actually build out the architecture and like spec out what they want to do. I think it's really important. But in general, yeah, making sure that there's some kind of, especially for projects with tokens, like some kind of buy-in to the network is really important.
If we were gonna do a, let's say, like competition where the community could vote on something, and the winner got the grant to do the thing, what would be a cool thing to vote on? Do you think? Thank you, Lane.
In terms of like, would they be voting on applications? Would they be voting like particular features? Would they be voting on like what did you have maybe a direction in mind in terms of the kinds of things they'd be voting on?
No, but that's a good, so let's say it's a feature, or I didn't have any scope. But if it was a feature, well, what are some options for things they could vote on? Then I could also then get someone outside.
They could vote on, well, yeah, I'm totally biased. They could vote on hackathon prizes. Yeah, I think that ultimately there's a lot of options around like what kind of direction people would like to see for future features. Just getting the community involved in general in like the product roadmap and like product discussions, I think is a good idea.
Rafi, maybe if there was some like peer tutoring, almost like getting community members to help build skills around the streaming, because it seems like that, hearing from my team at least, it's like getting more people really au fait with the streaming side of it, and then a good amount of docs to get the simple stream working. To just, yeah, streamline.
That's a really cool idea. Thank you. And I know we're at time, so we can wrap it up. But if anyone wants to get involved with the Livepeer community, first of all, thank you so much to Mahoney, Anna, Scott, and Lane,
Mani.
And Nelson. Mani, thank you for, I don't want to, I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
Mani. I'm probably not the first person who's messed that up, but thank you. Now we all know. if anyone, thank you guys so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to follow up with each of you to get your address to send you a thank you note and a gift. But thank you very much. And thanks everyone for the time and attention. And if anyone wants to get involved with Livepeer community work or the community node, please reach out to me. And I would love to get you involved. Thanks.
Thanks,
Have a great
Rafi,
day.
for organizing.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Nelson.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye.
Thanks again. Bye, y'all.